Alright, in this video tutorial, we're going to take a look at drawing clothing, and hopefully I can pass on some tips that I've picked up about drawing clothing. Drawing clothing can be tricky, but if you understand the clothing that you're drawing, it's a little bit easier. So first, let's talk about the cloth. So let's say that this is a sheet of cloth, basically, and this sheet of cloth has cross contour lines. And now these are lines that we can't see, but they basically give us information about the structure of the object. So if we were to take this cloth and wrinkle it, basically the top line of the cloth would bend a little bit like I've drawn here. And of course the cloth has an end on both sides, and that end is going to bend a little bit as well. Now each time the cloth bends within the form itself, there's going to be a vertical line that comes down, so we need to indicate those as well. So basically I'm just drawing right now the wrinkled piece of fabric, or the wrinkled piece of cloth. There we go. Now let's revisit those cross contour lines so we can understand what happens to them when a piece of cloth is folded. So the line might go in, it's going to bend back out, and then go right across the front of the middle fold, and then right off the end there. So if you start thinking about the cross contour lines, you have a better understanding of the piece of fabric as it is folded. This is important just so that we can get this in our mind. We're not necessarily going to draw cross contour lines like this, but it just helps us better understand fabric when it's not folded, and then fabric when it is folded, which is how we're going to try to draw it. Now let's revisit that piece of cloth again, and let's say that the piece of clothing that you're drawing is cylindrical. In other words, maybe it's on a shirt, maybe it's at the end of a shirt. So basically, if we take that flat piece of cloth and roll it into a cylinder, if we could actually do that, the two forms would kind of look like this. So again, let's think about the cross contour lines. Of course, we've got cross contour lines that theoretically exist on the piece of cloth. Now on the cylinder, of course, it would follow the cross contours of the cylinder just like this. Now when cloth is folded, let's say the majority of the cloth is going to maintain its cylinder form, but at the end it kind of is bundled up together, like you would find at the end of a shirt maybe that has a cuff link or something like that. So that's kind of what I'm going to draw here. Or maybe someone's taken a rubber band and put it at the end of that cloth that's folded like a cylinder. So at the bottom, of course, the cloth is going to kind of get all mushed up together here. So I'm just going to draw the lines to indicate that first. And then up here at the top, or right above that area that we've got kind of mushed together, there's going to be a few vertical lines that come out of that. And those lines might curve a little bit. But more importantly, we need to understand the cross contour lines and what they do. Well, obviously, where there's no folds, those lines are just going to follow the same direction as they did on the cylinder form of our cloth. But when we get into those wrinkles, they're going to go up and down, kind of like we saw in the first example. Now, we might not be actually drawing these cross contour lines, but again, it's important for us to understand them, because that's going to help us make decisions about where to put value, and it will help us better understand what we're drawing, which is very important. All right, again, let's take this flat piece of cloth, and this is something else to consider when you're drawing folds in fabric or clothing. And let's say this fabric is sitting on a flat surface and has a few wrinkles in it. So to draw that, I'll kind of draw the similar shape that I did before, with obviously just a few wrinkles. And basically what I'm doing here is I'm drawing the same piece of fabric that I did in the first example, just kind of laid on its side. So we have basically in this example kind of three ridges. Now the best thing to do is to think about these ridges as basically like little hills. So each time that ridge goes up, there's a hill, and every time it goes down, well, we can think of those as valleys. And that's important because that will help us understand where we need to put our value, or basically where we need to put dark values and light values. Obviously, the valleys are going to be darker in value. They're going to have some shadow in there. And the hills are going to be lighter in value. And that's going to create the illusion of the wrinkles in clothing that we're after. As long as we have the lighter values where parts of our clothing stick out, and we have darker values where parts of our clothing recede, we're going to create that illusion of folds in fabric or folds in clothing. And obviously there's going to be some cast shadow too around the endings of clothes and where pieces of clothes overlap other pieces of clothes or folds within the clothes. All right, let's take a look at a practical example here, and I'm just going to do a quick sketch of a person. I'm just going to concentrate on the upper part of their body, and this person's drawing a shirt that has a lot of folds in it, so I thought that would be a good example to show you. Basically, I just sketch everything out lightly, and then once I become confident with what I've got on the paper, I can get a little darker with my lines. And I'm going to concentrate on putting down the ridges that exist that I see. So anywhere where I see any contrast in value between dark and light, I know that there needs to be a fold there in my clothing, so I'll go ahead and draw a line for that. Then once I've got the lines established where the folds happen, I can go back and define those hills and valleys that we talked about before by adding some darker values in the valleys and leaving the lighter values for the peaks of the hills. And creating that contrast in value is going to create the illusion of folds in the clothing. Now, I'm using a photo reference here, and I suggest that you use a photo reference, or better yet, find a live model to look at, because you can't really just make up those folds. You have to really pay attention to what you're seeing. But as I said earlier, understanding what happens in those folds will help us create that illusion that we're after. So understanding the cross contours of the fabric itself, and then understanding that darker values exist in the valleys and lighter values exist in the hills will work together to create that illusion of folded clothes or wrinkles in clothing that we're after. So basically that's it. Remember, just think about the cross contour lines and think about those hills and valleys, and you can't go wrong when you're drawing any types of folds in clothing.